Morning, everybody. Our second talk continues the second millennium theme, and I call on Adela Oppenheim to talk about the exhibition forthcoming at the Met this fall.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. As you see, what I'm talking about today, for once, I'm not talking about our exhibition at Dashur, but still in the Middle Kingdom. Our exhibition, Ancient Egypt Transformed, the Middle Kingdom, which opens at the Metropolitan Museum on October 5th and runs through January 24th. So we hope to see you all there. The exhibition is being curated by myself and Dorothea Arnold, who retired, but she hasn't really been retiring, and with the assistance of Dieter Arnold and Kei Yamamoto, and in fact, actually, our entire department and any number of lenders. We have 34, I believe 34 museums and private collectors who are lending to the exhibition, and I've lost track of how many authors of our catalogs, and many of you are here today, lenders and authors, and so we would also like to thank all of you. It's really a huge group effort that I'm here representing this morning. So the theme of our exhibition is, of course, it's a comprehensive exhibition of the Middle Kingdom, and the Middle Kingdom as a transformational period, during which the ideas that and the basic elements of Egyptian culture that first took root in the Old Kingdom, and then of course we have the first intermediate period where there's a breakup of central authority and a lot of elements of Egyptian culture. In the Middle Kingdom, many elements, I would even say almost everything about Egyptian culture is really transformed. Ideas about kingship, art, religion, the afterlife of the king, the role of the queens, all of these things undergo very profound transformations, and that is the theme of our show. Now, as you know, the Metropolitan Museum has a very long history of excavating Middle Kingdom sites at Deir el-Bahri, at Lisht, and even into the present day at Dashur. So all of this has worked into the exhibition. The exhibition has several components. It's not thematic and it's not chronological, but it is a little bit combined. And I should actually just quickly go back and say, the show will open with this colossal or monumental image of the pharaoh Mentuhotep Nebhepet-Re, who reunites Egypt from the south at the beginning of the 11th dynasty. So as far as we know, this is an area of Egypt that was not a center of very much in the Old Kingdom. But this is where the Middle Kingdom starts, with a different artistic style, with some different cultural principles. We don't know very much about Mentuhotep II, to call him by his abbreviated name, but he must have been a very forceful individual. And to be able to continue this reunification process, and I think it must have been, of course, through military conquest, which we know some things about, but also through the power of persuasion, because that's what you see here. You see a pharaoh a bit in the Old Kingdom mode, or even earlier. He reminds me always of the Min figures, the early dynastic Min figures. And he's presenting himself as this confident pharaoh ready to lead the country. Now this is his successor, Mentuhotep Seyankore, Mentuhotep III, and shown here in quite a different conception of the body underneath the cloak. So as the country is solidified in its newly reunified state, we have what we presume to be more contact with the northern part of Egypt, and then the artistic influence is quite obvious, particularly in the later part of the reign of Mentuhotep II and into the reign of Mentuhotep III. So our first main gallery will show these transitions and this early Theban center of the Middle Kingdom. And this is an object in our collection, a relief of Mentuhotep II from his temple at Deir el-Bahri, the first major cult temple for the king since the end of the Old Kingdom. And then we continue with the next dynasty, the 12th dynasty, and the return to the traditional capital in the north, and the resumption of pyramid building. And this is Amenemhat I in a very typical scene surrounded by two gods and two goddesses. It's showing the reunification of the country, the unification of the country, the North and the South, and also the king in the company of the gods. It's a very typical scene that we would know from the Old Kingdom. And at the same time as these pyramid complexes are revived, the high officials are buried around them. So this is another work from Liszt of a man named Sehedep Ibre Ankh. Again, you see here the influence of the Old Kingdom and what they're still able to observe of the Memphite pyramid complexes of the Old Kingdom. They face the future confidently, they face the world confidently, the afterlife, with these idealized forms, youthful, smooth-cheeked, and of course, as we know, that changes later during the dynasty. So after these two introductory sections showing the foundations of the Middle Kingdom in the 11th and the early 12th dynasties, we move to some themes, the layers of society and the pharaoh. Starting with this magnificent head of Senwosret I. This is actually a sculpture that's in a relatively small museum in Stockholm. And it's from Karnak. It was a gift to the Swedish government from the Egyptians for their contribution to the Aswan Dam project. So in a way, this head is actually like our Temple of Dendur, but in a different scale. So it'll be nice to have that there. And as far as I know, since it's left Egypt, it's never traveled. And again, you see here Senwosret I as the youthful, confident pharaoh, even smiling a little bit, even looking a little bit slightly benign, maybe more benign than you would want to be as a pharaoh. And then we have this head, which is the head in Kansas City in the Nelson Atkins Museum. It has been cleaned over the last year, and he's quite spectacular. He has this very complicated bone structure. This is a monumental work in quartzite. And quartzite, I think, in the Middle Kingdom, and actually in other periods as well, but in the Middle Kingdom, it's a stone which the Egyptians really created some incredibly beautiful faces from this very hard material. So what do we have here? Senwosret III is actually the best represented pharaoh in the exhibition. There are 5 works of this king. We have a whole new conception of kingship. Here the king is mature. I don't really want to say that he's aged exactly, but he is mature. He's sober. Was he really old, Senwosret III? We have no idea. And in fact, when you see the body of this king, it's not the body of an old man. He's youthful, he's fit, he's muscular. And what these statues are to me is they're a kind of composite. Just as the Egyptians have the face of an animal and the head of an animal on a human body, what they have here is a mature face on a youthful body. It's a different kind of composite. And what does this show us? It shows the pharaoh physically fit to lead the country, but with the maturity, the mental maturity, the intellectual maturity to be a strong leader. And I just want to say here, about 2/3 of the works in the exhibition, of course there's going to be a large catalog that will accompany it, and about 2/3 of the work in the exhibition have been photographed by Anna Marie Kellen in the museum's photo studio, and she has done a really spectacular job. So I hope that in the catalog, one of the highlights of this will be to have these really beautiful photos of a lot of pieces which I think are not that well known. Now this is again Senwosret III as a sphinx in the collection of the Metropolitan Museum, and again you see these same features. Slightly sagging flesh, a very complicated bone structure. The mouth is no longer smiling. Sometimes it's actually turning down at the corners, sometimes it levels out. It's not always completely a downturned mouth if you look closely. But then you look at the body. Now, of course, it's a lion, so it's a real composite of human and animal. But this isn't an image of age in any sense, but it's an image of power. And you have this, I think, particularly here, in the tautness of the muscles and the sinews at the side. And if you look at actual lions, you see here when the lion is in this watchful position something similar. And this can be also how the lions hunt. They sort of sneak up on their prey. I had some pictures of it, but a little video, but it was too gruesome. And it ended badly. But again, here you see this is, in the lioness is very much like this, in this watchful position that she's sitting here with this very taut muscles. Now, we will also have the model of the pyramid complex of Senwosret III, which is being created in the museum by our master molder, Ron Street, who actually makes some of the reproductions for the gift shop. But this has been a really nice project for him. And this is just the computer rendering. He's made all the little components, all the little pyramids and the sections of the wall, and he'll be assembling it in the summer. Oh, and that got slightly out of order, I'm sorry. So the pharaoh section continues with Amenemhat III, the son of Senwosret III, in this beautiful work from Copenhagen in Greywacke. And you really want to, we have no idea what Amenemhat III looked like. And of course, his images are very diverse. But you really think somehow this is a portrait. And what I find most amazing about it is here in the face, you really feel the softness, this velvety texture of the skin, combined with this crown, which is, you feel the hardness of it and the shine. And he's just a stunning work. In a way, sometimes I think these works are so beautiful, one should just look at them, and when I should just shut up and you can look at it and it's wonderful. Then we move on to the royal women. In this period, there's a little bit of a discussion. Does the role of the royal women really diminish? Because we do have, they have smaller pyramid complexes and smaller temples than some of the Old Kingdom queens have. We do have the queen here as Sphinx, and we will have this piece from Brooklyn, which has some reworking and a very complicated history, and also a Sphinx from Boston. Unfortunately, just the heads, they don't have their bodies any longer. And then we have the Siddhartha unit jewelry, and we're very fortunate in the Metropolitan Museum that we have one of the, there are very few great collections of Royal Middle Kingdom jewelry, and the only one outside of Egypt is in the Metropolitan Museum, and so we will be showing that. And Diana Patch has been working also on the question of these sets. It's clearly in two sets. This is the multicolored set, and how the women wore these in different kinds of rituals, and their different ritual aspects. Then we have also the reliefs we've jumped a little bit in time here, these are a little bit earlier, the reliefs from the Mentuhotep women, the queens who are also Hathor priestesses. So we have the Queen Nefru here having her hair done, which must have a ritual meaning. This is not just a trip to the beauty parlor. And we'll have some other fragments as well from that tomb. And then pieces from the shrine. There were these 6 or maybe even 8 shrines of wives of Mentuhotep II, and this is Queen Kemset from the British Museum. And then we move on to the officials. And in the Middle Kingdom, you really have this profusion of statuary of officials and even workers, of people at many different levels of society. This section will open with 3 quartzite works from Berlin, the Louvre, and the British Museum, showing similar poses but all quite different. And I think this is also their chronological arrangement. This man, he used to be called Kerti-hotep, but now we must call him Nemti-hotep, and then Amenemhat-Ankh and Rehu-Ankh. And they show again the beauty of the work in quartzite. And that's just a detail of the Nemti-hotep from Berlin and the beautiful treatment of the hands. Especially in the later part of the 12th dynasty and into the 13th dynasty, there is, at the same time, you get this very sensitive treatment, as you saw, of the hands of Nemti-hotep. There's also this tendency to abstract the body in different ways. So this is a man named Sobek Emsaf from Vienna. He's about life-size. And here you see the body is really, of course he's obese, so the garment comes forward, but the body is really abstracted underneath this cylinder of cloth. And this is the same thing for this Mr. Gebu from Copenhagen, who is in a cross-legged pose, in a squatting pose, but you don't really have the sense of his lower legs or of his feet don't protrude from the sides. So it's again the simplification of the body and then this really very beautiful and very powerful face. We also have women, the high officials' wives and daughters. Here one of the women from Bersha, from the tomb of Jehudi Nacht. I hope I got that right. I mixed up the Nacht and the Hotep. And then Satznofru, who was actually mentioned in one of the earlier talks as a parallel for this piece that was found in Megiddo, if you heard that presentation. Now, it's during the Middle Kingdom that we also have more information about the Egyptians looking beyond their borders. And this goes into two different directions. One is military conquest, particularly in relation to the Sudan, to Nubia, and the other is trade. So we have here a battle scene, and in keeping with Laurel's talk this morning, I wouldn't actually necessarily say it represents a historical battle. These are Asiatics who are falling from their castle. That's actually a reconstruction of, it's amazing how many pictures came up that I had in my presentation in just the last few hours. This is from the tomb of Intef, and it shows the foreigners falling. The Egyptians have a little siege tower, and then they whack them and they fall. And that's part of a similar scene from the temple of Mentuhotep Nebhepet-Re. And then we have on the other side, we have the peaceful relations between Egyptians and foreigners. And we have evidence of foreigners who were living in Egypt as part of the society and trading with the Egyptians, of course, as well. So here we have a woman who's Asiatic. Her dress and her costume are a little bit ambiguous in terms of exactly where she comes from, and she has a child on her back, which her arm here actually is reaching around to hold the child. One hand is coming outside of her cloak, but we think, and Dorothea Arnold thinks, and I think she's right, that the arm here is coming around to hold the child in place. Then we move on to some ideas of how society was organized. How did the Egyptians view the world? We have a lot of small figurines at this time that are placed in tombs. And of course, this is William. He's the sort of unofficial, I don't know if I'm supposed to say he's the unofficial mascot, but anyway, he's a very well-known piece. This is his moment. And he will be grouped with some other hippopotamus. And we also have this beautiful fish from Edinburgh. It's very, very small in gold, but it's a really stunning piece. So this is really about how the Egyptians understood life in the magical sense. And this is a lioness-headed figure, but she's actually a protective figure. She was found in the Ramesseum in what is supposed to be the kit of a magician, and she's holding two snake wands, and she was actually found with an actual snake wand. She's now in Manchester, and the snake wand is in Cambridge, but they will be reunited for this show. And then, of course, how did the Egyptians understand death? And some aspects of their understanding of the afterlife are really pretty consistent throughout Pharaonic civilization, but some things also change quite dramatically. And in the Middle Kingdom, we have these funerary models, these funerary figurines, which are placed in the tomb. They actually begin at the end of the Old Kingdom, but really have their great moment in the early half, let's say, of the Middle Kingdom. And this is one of the estate figures from the Mekhet-Re tomb, and she came out in this photo quite sexy, you know. She's really quite beautiful. Always, we knew she was always beautiful, but in this photo, I think also the sensuousness of the figure comes out very well. And we will have two coffins and a mummy from our own collection, including this one. And here you see, of course, in the Old Kingdom, the king became Osiris at death at the end, in the later part of the Old Kingdom. And in the Middle Kingdom, you have the concept that really anyone can become Osiris on their death. And so this is manifest by certain kinds of regalia that you would only have had for the king in previous periods, and now you have this for individuals. So here, for example, this mummy, he's wearing a uraeus on his brow. And then we have this beautiful set of canopic jars from Copenhagen. The canopic set is something that's really ubiquitous in Egyptian funerary culture, but here we have them with the human faces. And then connected with mortuary cult and temple cult is Abydos and Osiris. So we will have a selection, and they'll actually be in a kind of LA, of a whole variety of stela and small monuments from, or some that we think are from Abydos, some that we know are from Abydos. And this rise of Abydos and Osiris is something that's really unique to the Middle Kingdom and a very important aspect of that culture. So we have, so we have this little shrine and then a bigger stela from Leiden, so it's nice because it gives us a little sense of architecture, and then this small figurine, which actually didn't go with this shrine, but it just gives you a sense of how those things looked. This is a new acquisition of about a little bit less than a year ago of the Metropolitan Museum of the stela of a man named Chemes from the 13th dynasty, here shown in a mummiform figure and as a praying figure on the other side. And it has this beautiful architectural base showing these niched walls with projections and recesses, which we know even from archaic periods, and then they're revived in the Middle Kingdom. And this is a beautiful stele. I'm afraid that the image, it has so much detail, it flares in the PowerPoint, but this is a really spectacular 11th dynasty stela from the Louvre with a tremendous amount of really beautiful detail, and then little scenes here of these, to us at least, mysterious rites surrounding Osiris and Abydos. And then the last section of the exhibition is, because my time is almost up, is the temple. And this is really the period where we know that the Egyptian pharaohs started to centrally commission temples. And they are decorated with stone relief and much more sculpture. The Old Kingdom, they were really more local affairs. So we have this beautiful bull, or perhaps cow, deity, a bovine deity from the Louvre, showing this in this modeling, the wonderful treatment of Middle Kingdom animal figures. And then this truly spectacular relief from the Petrie Museum showing Senwosret I running to the god Min. This is from the temple at Coptos. He has the most amazing face, and there's all kinds of beautiful detail in it. And hopefully people won't be too shocked. You know, in Petrie's publication, they put a little label over them. So we're not going to do that. And then the last piece that people will see is Amenemhat III from Bubastis. He's now in the British Museum. And I think this really sums up the whole Middle Kingdom. This is really an image about power. It was a monumental image. In the Middle Kingdom, we have a lot more monumental sculptures, many more than we did in the Old Kingdom. And it's really an image, I think, of raw power that would make people fear the king, perhaps. And included is this sculpture that we have on long-term loan. It's actually in the museum's main hall where it will stay. That represents probably Amenemhat II. It was reworked in the Ramessid period a few times. But he's in our main hall. He's been there for a few years now, and he will stay longer, but he's also part of the exhibition. And thank you very much. And we